We now look at ethical foundations for public theology. All of us live by ethics. We have standards and values that shape and direct our lives. They may be positive or negative, or a mix of both. We are always in moral formation from the moment in life when we begin to know right from wrong, good from bad. Underpinning our patterns of thought and actions and relationships and behaviours are values and virtues, which we hope contribute to the good life and flourishing of ourselves and the community and the world. We hope for and we live for the common good. Religions are moral communities and communities of moral formation. Religions are expressions of spirituality and ethics. They give expression to the ultimate and the sacred, and theology is the way in which they talk about the sacred or divine. Theology is not only God talk, it is also about a way of life, how we live, act, and behave. Religious practice is the sacred coming to life within and between us, and it is how we live the sacred in the life of the world. Theology and ethics are inseparable. Religion and morality are indivisible. They are not always liberating, but at times can be repressive. There is good religion and bad religion, good theology and bad theology, good and bad ethics. Life can be ambiguous, and life issues can be not just 50 shades of grey, but 150 shades. Theology and ethics are complex. There is nothing simple, and living in faith or living faithfully is often a struggle. The good life, personally or communally, does not come easily. Sacred texts, Jewish, Christian, and Muslim, are a witness to that. There is dispute and struggle within the text, which is the expression of the community struggle to live by the truth and good. Some stories in the Bible are for peace, while others support violence. Some are positive about women, while other texts are sexist, patriarchal, and misogynist. We look at the ethics of the reign of God. The core symbol of the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the core symbol is the kingdom or reign of God. Mark, the earliest gospel, has Jesus in the Roman province of Galilee proclaiming in word and action the kingdom of God. For these faith communities, the kingdom or the reign of God was core and central to their lifestyle and worldview. The word kingdom or reign is also the Greek word for empire. They were using the symbol in a subversive way, a subversive and radically alternative empire to the Empire of Rome. The communities for whom the Gospels were written were living in the all-pervasive presence of the Roman superpower, and Jesus himself had lived and worked in the totally dominated province of Galilee. The Roman Empire was everywhere, dominated all of life, and that is why the symbol of kingdom or empire of God is so central. To proclaim an alternative empire to a dominated and oppressed people was a dangerous thing to do, and a violent, dominating military system had ways of dealing with insurrectionists. The state executed them. The empire or reign of God means that the Roman Empire did not determine truth or reality, nor does it shape ethics and values. It is not normative. There are subversive values and ethics, a different form, an alternative reality, an upside-down kingdom or empire. The norm is not the norm. There are ethics, values, and a way of life that are radically different and more peaceful and liberating. Jesus didn't invent the symbol of the kingdom of God. It was already there in his Hebrew Bible. The most frequent quoted texts from the Hebrew Bible in the first three Gospels are from the books of Isaiah and Deuteronomy, but especially from the book of Isaiah. There are 17 passages from Isaiah which use the symbol of God's kingdom, and most of them are from the part of the book that is set in Babylonian exile when prophets were shaping hope out of disaster and despair. Or some are from the era of return from exile, and when there was the shaping of justice and peace-based visions of rebuilding life and community. There are 7 key kingdom themes that were also picked up by Jesus and gospel communities to shape their response and life ethics in the face of Roman domination. 1 is liberation, in all 17 texts from Isaiah. 2, righteousness or justice, in 16 of those texts. 3, peace, in 14 texts. 4, joy, in 12 texts. 5, return from exile or domination, in 9 texts. 6, God as spirit or light, in 9 texts. And 7, healing, in 7 of those texts. These are the key expressions of God's kingdom in the book of Isaiah and the first 3 Gospels. This is what God is up to in the world, and this is the life praxis of people who are active participants in God's kingdom on earth. The spirit, energy, or power working against all that dominates and oppresses humans and nature. The light that shines in darkness is for liberation, justice, peace, joy, return or a coming home, and healing. At the heart of the world, these are the divine praxis and the praxis of our human faith community. This is what we mean by the presence and activity of the sacred in the world, the core symbol of kingdom of God, which draws us into participatory action. We look at the ethics of social responsibility. No one writes more clearly in the English language about ethics today, perhaps, than former Chief Rabbi Jonathan Sacks. When you read Sacks, you begin to realize, as a Christian, that here are the deep ethical roots of Christianity, that these are the ethics that shaped Jesus and Paul, and that neither can be understood without knowing their Hebrew Bible. Somehow Christians, as part of our anti-Jewishness, manage to say that the Old Testament can only be understood in the light of the New Testament. Even the Christian invention of those terms, Old and New Testaments, was anti-Jewish supersessionism. The truth is that we can only understand the Christian Testament in the light of the Hebrew Bible. This means learning to read the Hebrew Bible on its own terms and not through the supersessionist lens that Christians invented. And in reading Sacks, you meet a Jew reading his own sacred text. And this is why we need to do theology today in the midst of others, with those of other religions, including Judaism. We will explore doing theology with other religions in session 5. Meanwhile, the Jewish Sacks begins his essays in ethics with the prologue to the Hebrew Bible, Genesis chapters 1 to 11. The Hebrew Bible as we have it today was shaped by the rivers of Babylon. In exile, a creative group of exiled and still traumatized Hebrews organized and edited their sacred writings. Like all good books, they put in place a prologue that sets out all the key themes that will follow in the rest of the writings. What Sacks shows in dealing with the prologue is that from the outset, the Jews were involved in ethicizing religion. From chapter 1 of Genesis, we have what Sacks calls the Genesis of justice. These chapters are neither science nor history, but profound myths or stories giving profound expression to ethics for life. Right from the opening chapter, the core central word and theme of Genesis through to Revelation, justice, is prominent. The Judeo-Christian faith is ethical and is centered on the ethic of social justice. Sachs writes of 7 features of Jewish ethics. They are all in the prologue to the Hebrew Bible, and they are the dignity of the individual, human freedom, the sanctity of life, guilt, not shame, shame having to do with honor, guilt having to do with moral responsibility, loyalty and love, the ethics of covenant. And then he deals with the dual covenant, which is covenant in particular terms and covenant with all people, the universal. In another book, Sachs deals extensively with 4 of the prologue stories. There is the Adam and Eve story about the ethical life and limits of freedom. Cain and Abel is the story about human tragedy, murder, and the denial of moral responsibility. The Noah or flood story is about a person with moral integrity, personal righteousness, but no public impact, a failure of collective responsibility. And finally, there is the Tower of Babel story of confusion. Babel is a story of imperialism, domination, playing at being ultimate, and failing to recognize that we are answerable to something or someone beyond ourselves. Failure to be responsible. And since ethics are never private, it is social responsibility. In all of this, what Sachs is drawing from is his Hebrew Bible and its prologue, and an ethics of responsibility. With, he says, an emphasis on love of God and humanity, and on the categorical dignity of the individual as such, regardless of power or status. The Hebrew Bible, he claims, is an extended essay on human responsibility. Jesus and Paul are in that Jewish tradition, and it is also true to say that the Christian Testament from Matthew through to Revelation is also an extended essay on human responsibility. Ethical foundations of public theology will also find energy and inspiration in a core biblical idea of covenant. Now, covenant has been misused and abused in history, politicized in a way that is characterized by particularism and exceptionalism. The Hebrew symbol of covenant is essentially about relationships, about neighborliness. This is a social vision, a vision of a community in solidarity and committed to the well-being, the common good, and flourishing of the whole human and environmental community. Covenant is a radical economic vision of community, an alternative economic system, a vision of just economics. The vision is seeking to ensure that there is never a permanent underclass in society. Covenant is shaped by core ethics and values. There are a cluster of ethical values associated with covenant. The covenant ethics are justice, compassion, righteousness, and peace. The ethics of covenant are justice, social, distributive, and restorative justice. Compassion, with its social solidarity. We are in life together, alongside the poor and vulnerable, in liberating ways for all of us. Mercy, sometimes used interchangeably with compassion, means that we are not a punitive society, not exclusively. We look for redemption and liberation. Righteousness sounds perhaps too like self-righteousness, toxic moralism and superiority. But righteousness means right relations based on justice. There are no right relations without justice and just relationships. Peace processes often forget that. All this adds up to peace, the biblical shalom, or total well-being of persons, community, and environment. These are the ethics of covenant, and they are the foundational ethics of public theology. They are the applied social ethics of public theology. 2 questions for group discussion. One is to reflect on the key characteristics of the kingdom symbol in the book of Isaiah? What clues do they give us to the presence and activity of the sacred in the world and about our own ethical and social spiritual responsibility? The second is the Bible is an extended essay on human responsibility. What does this mean for the practice of public theology? And how is the faith community a covenant community in practice?